Welcome to another episode of VNture podcast, your weekly source of visual novel goodness. I am Emar, and together with Taurus we shall venture into another discussion about VNs. Today we have a pleasure to welcome a very passionate indie VN creator and a YouTube tutorialist sharing all the most juicy secrets to their design. Please, if you could introduce yourself and say hello, Vimi.
I'm Vimi. I'm a tutorialist. I've never heard of that phrase being or the term being used there. Tutorialist. Yes. But yeah, I have experience making visual novels. I'm featured on the Ren'Py homepage. For all three of you out there who know what Ren'Py is. I've been making games for, I want to say 13-ish years now. And I'm I'm a cool guy.
Yes, very much so. Yes, thank you again for being our guest here on this episode. So you mentioned that you've been involved for about 13 years now. How did that start? Like, did you know you wanted to get into the game industry, and how did that tie into going into visual novels?
No, I really wanted money.
Oof, you picked an
Yeah.
interesting career choice for that.
Oh, yeah. It was a real mistake. I went to school for art. Real bonehead move on my part. But I really thought, like, when I was younger, like, oh, I'll do programming because, people pay money for that. I took all the programming courses my high school had to offer, and I did not like them. I was like, I'm never going to do that again. And I went into the arts, and I was like, at least I'm away from programming. But I have been doing illustration for like children's books. I should have mentioned that in the intro. I have like 8 children's books that I've illustrated for.
Wow.
Tons of magazine work. I paid off my student loans early with that money. Like, not bad. But at a certain point, like, I wanted a day job instead of all the freelance stuff, and a local game company just kind of called me up. I managed to get some work with them, and I just really took to it. I really enjoyed making games with them. And I've been doing that ever since, until pretty soon I couldn't get enough of it at work, and I took it home with me.
So then you started up your own, I guess, passion project, Gigs at Home then, right?
Yeah, it did not start as a video game though. I just had an idea in my head where it's like, I've been doing all these children's books, but I don't really like them. A lot of them that I was illustrating for, because I'm like, I have like this particular sensibility where I really want to like just draw really weird stuff, action packed. And I wasn't getting those sorts of projects. So I was like, oh, well, what's something that works for me? And at first I was trying to do comics, but then it's like, I didn't really like the format. It didn't feel as much fun as it was to like make games. So then I tried making them like interactive comics, because at the time there were a few companies that were dealing with that sort of stuff where they were trying to make comics for like the iPad and phones and make them a little bit more interesting. And even experimenting with those tools, I really wasn't pleased with the results. So by the time I was like, well, I need to find something where I can make my own version of this, where I can, oh no, I have to program. I'll have to learn that. Where's something where I can, make this kind of interactive comic the way I want to make it? I all of a sudden stumbled on the visual novel community, where there was this engine Ren'Py that was pretty easy to write in. I was able to get a like gray box first pass of my story that I wanted to do in a pretty short amount of time. And it kind of took off from there. All of a sudden, it's, what started off as like, comics. All of a sudden, I am just really ingratiated in this community, where I have, won some competitions. I've just talked with so many other developers in this space. I really kind of we've been building off of each other's knowledge, and there's just lots of interesting tricks of the trade that I managed to pick up from there.
Mm-hmm. And you've been sharing a lot of those tips and tricks in game dev and in Renpai on your YouTube channel, which is actually doing really well. I mean, you've got over 8,000 subscribers. Your videos are getting like tens of thousands of views, and there's lots of people who learn a lot from it. So, at what point did you think to create this YouTube channel? How did that get started?
I think it was when I did my first talk for visual novel conference. It's just kind of one of those in this very small English visual novel community of ours, we only have like a few venues where we can really kind of show off stuff to each other. And that's one of them. So I decided to do a talk where the person who runs Dev Talk, Nye, really talked up my talk that I was going to be presenting, which I think I went with the title Cinematography in Visual Novel Design or something. Awful title. Now I know. when I redid it as a video for my channel, I called it Level Up Your Sprites. It did a lot better than that. But yeah, so I did this talk. I thought it was interesting. People really seemed to enjoy it. And I realized I probably ought to... Wait, no, I did the channel before then. Yeah, because that was an advertisement for it. Why did I do the channel? Ugh. I gotta think about this.
Well, at least from the sounds of it, that sounds like important genesis point for it, where you were invited to the conference with Nye Driflin, right? And then that's kind of fed into the idea of becoming a channel over at let me get the name. Visual Novel Design at Vimi.
Yeah, I originally called it Vima Slick Art because I was like, oh, this will be a great way to talk about my visual novels on the side. But as the channel was going on and I realized why people were coming by, it wasn't to check out my stuff, which is fine because I wasn't really presenting my stuff all that often.
Huh?
It was because they want to learn about, making their own visual novels. So I ended up changing the header, the name, just a lot of this stuff just so I had better SEO on visual novel design.
Oh god, you definitely have a very good name for a YouTube channel. And we speak from experience. Having puns in the name does not bode well with search results.
Yeah, I think once I changed the name, my daily subscriber count doubled.
Huh.
Oh,
So I
nice.
was going from like on average 20 subscribers a day to now it's around like 30, 40 a day. And that's, with a month between videos that I'm releasing now. Once I do release videos, like the numbers go up a little bit. But yeah, now that I've thought about it for a minute, I think it was just realizing early on that a lot of people had questions. Visual now, at least other devs in the space were interested in the stuff I was putting out. They had lots of questions about how I was putting stuff together. And I said to myself, well, I can keep answering these questions, or I can make videos and then just send them to the videos. And then I don't have to, do this all over again. But at a certain point, I realized that I was getting a lot out of doing these videos where a lot of these concepts kind of existed in a sort of nebulous state where I'm like, I kind of know how to program this stuff as far as like how I need to. But once I started like writing out these scripts and trying to figure out like, well, how would I teach this to somebody else? It's just like the Richard Feynman method of just learning stuff even better. It's to teach it to other people because you quickly realize the limits of your own knowledge. And suddenly you need to find out how to fill in those gaps. So every single one of these videos where I have some aspect of programming, of writing, or even just design solutions for stuff, I found that it's really enriched my own knowledge and has forced me to think more critically about a lot of the sorts of things that I had previously been doing intuitively.
I can't agree more with your statement about the moment you try to explain something, you came to realization of all the missing pieces of your own understanding. That is such
thinking
yeah.
thinking I was teaching this I was inspired by the visual novel conference, and I quickly realized that's not right.
I can agree more. And I need to get to the bottom of the programming arc, okay? So, if I piece together your origin story, the Vimi, the beginning.
Yep.
So, you stumbled upon visual novel group in order to avoid programming, and you found out engines which you can use instead of programming your own game from scratch to fulfill your creative streak of creating programming at the same time. Is that correct?
Yeah, but somewhere in there I somehow just learned how to program, and it turns out I'm not bad at it.
Okay, so there is a redemption arc for programming in your story.
Well, I mean, the thing is, when I was taking the programming courses in high school, like, I wasn't bad at them. I got A's. I was doing very well at them, but I just found that it was very like unfulfilling. But in the same way, when I decided, well, I'll go into art because that's going to be very fulfilling. But as I was doing the art for other people, I realized it was also kind of unfulfilling in its own way. Where, yes, I'm doing the thing that I enjoy doing. Like, I physically enjoy illustrating in a way that I don't physically enjoy programming, but it's just not fulfilling. But somehow you put all this, chocolate and peanut butter together of the programming and the art, all of a sudden, like, it adds up to a delectable treat that is spiritually fulfilling.
Okay, so I guess you reached the same conclusion as your early depiction of children's book, that you just you liked drawing, but you didn't like those books.
Yep.
Okay.
I thought I was never going to work with this one author again, but he got I'm not going to name him, although if you Google it, I'm sure you could find him. He wrote this book series where it's about like this super rich kid who got rich with his own like little app idea. And I was like, oh, this sounds hilarious, because like the app that he wrote was it'll solve all your problems. It's a problem solving app. And I was like, aha, I know how narratives work. He's going to write a solving people's problems app. He's going to make a ton of money on it, but it turns out it's going to create more problems. And now he needs to spend all that money that he earned through this awful app to all of a sudden fix these problems that he inadvertently caused. I know how this is going. That is not how it went. It was literally just he wrote a stupid app that made a ton of money, and now people are like, you're so rich, you must know how to solve problems. And that's what the whole book series was about, was just asking a rich person to solve things. And I was so mad. I really hated it. I was like, this is stupid, morally bankrupt. At one point, he spends a weekend with a Richard Branson-esque character where his dad comes along with him. Good call. But at some point, he's just like, okay, now we're going to go up into the sky, but you stay here, Dad. What? No, don't do that. Don't let your son go with this rich person alone. So I told all that to the author.
Oh my goodness.
Because he emailed me, and I was just like, I disagree with everything in your books. But then I did 4 more with him, so I think he was more delighted by torturing me than anything.
Oh god.
I get that it's a children's book, and sometimes you really have to dumb things down and make stories very simple. On the other hand,
it's not even dumbed down. It's somehow more complex, because now all of a sudden there's this weird concept of like, hey, rich people just know how to do things, and it's like that. What?
And as far as I could tell, it's like, what's the conflict involved? It's just people come to him and ask for help, and he just consults his app and he answers it, and that's it.
Well, even in the book, it's in the book series, it's whenever he solves the problem and he gets paid a huge amount of money, he somehow uses that money that he got paid to help other people, which is like, that's a capitalist lie that Fox News tells you that rich people reinvest in their communities. They don't. They keep it in the bank and everyone gets poorer.
What
Man,
a crazy book series.
I am just a ray of sunshine. I'm so sorry.
Going back to something you mentioned, how your work was more fulfilling and nowadays compared to stuff you've tried in the past. I wanted to touch up on the fact that you're also putting out the videos and a whole ton of advice to other aspiring indie newbies. For people who are trying to make their own little small visual novel or trying to burst into the scene. There's a whole lot of indie companies who've gotten all this advice from your channel that you mentioned that there just wasn't a community for 10 plus years ago, and this knowledge wasn't generally available in the same way that you might have it when you're actually in your career field with other game dev companies, right?
I mean, no, there have been really big communities for it. The Lemisoft forums for Ren'Py have been around for a while. Their Dev Talk is still like a really big community where I think it's like 4,000 some odd people there. The difference is a matter of how the knowledge is being spread. There's a lot of studios where they'll put out little articles and stuff like that. A few other devs who have like shared their knowledge, but just in platforms where it's made to all of a sudden like kind of either go back to their own stuff, or it's in these kind of smaller communities where you kind of have to go in and join up. And I've found that with my channel, there are a lot of people who either just haven't heard of these places, or at least people who are like dipping their toes in, where I put out surveys pretty regularly where I'm just like, hey, how many visual novels have you made? Most everybody who have been watching my channel, it's none. They've not made a visual novel yet. Some of them will just never make a visual novel. So the community that I'm really going towards, I guess, are just people who are unsure about this as a venture. Who are still just kind of dipping their toes into game development. And a big focus on my channel is on trying to get over that like first game. In every single one of these communities that I mentioned, like Lemisoft Devs Talk, a lot of the people that come on, they've either like just finished a game and they're just never going to do another, or they're in the process of doing a game and they're just never going to finish it. It's really, really tough to make a game. And most people's first games, like they're not doing something like the big recommendation is like, oh, make your first project a small one. No one does that. Who's going, oh man, I'm really passionate about doing this small game. No one is.
God, yeah.
So,
it would be smart. Yeah, sorry. It'd be smart to do a small game because then you can build up the experience and you can dip your toes in and you could learn some things instead of overwhelming yourself. But like you said, like if this is especially as a hobby, if someone's passionate about it, then they want to go straight for the story of their dreams that they've been brewing for years or whatever.
Yeah. Because, I mean, it would be one thing if this was a thriving industry with a lot of high-paying jobs later on. Because then, like, what people would be passionate about then is, like, getting into the industry and kind of building up those skills and working themselves into it. But for a lot of hobbyists, like, that's not really the drive. The drive is they have an idea. They have, there's something that they've already read where they're like, oh, I want to do something like that. Or they have some projects where they're like, oh, I just want to bring this into a different medium. How do I do that? So a lot of my videos, I try to go as broad with my advice as possible, both to assist with their programming, and I also do a number of videos that are just on, actual production, how to get your game from one end to another. So the hope is, as I ask these survey questions over time, hopefully subscribers who the previous year, maybe they did not finish their game, maybe they have it done, maybe they've dropped their project, but they've picked up another one that kind of works better for the medium. The hope is just that I turn people who are unsure about where they're at, and I give them a really solid direction to aim to, and I give them the skills and knowledge necessary to reach that point.
That's very noble. I mean, listening to you talking about surveys, one thing comes to my mind. Is there a possibility that there's a high percentage of those answering polls that aren't in a state of uncertainty about the venture, but that they are certain they're not creating visual novel, but they are just curious how the sausage is made?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
because
mean,
when I did ask if people would be interested in doing game jams, and the biggest answer by far was like, I have no interest
Oh,
at all. When I look at other channels that are popular in this space, not with visual novel design specifically, but just with game development, you look at things like Game Maker's Toolkit, or let's see here. Oh, there's this one channel where they do like good design, bad design for games. Yeah, most people are just interested in just kind of the stuff that goes into making these sorts of things. Eventually, I might tweak my content towards that audience. For now, though, I want to see how far I can go with just teaching other people.
okay.
Because it's a different sort of field entirely when you start going into, because a lot of those channels, when you look at like how they tweak their content, it's about creatively looking at a game and the design mechanics behind it. I think Game Maker's Toolkit has done game jams in the past, and they've built game content around that. But all of a sudden, it becomes like that channel has got to be a full-time job unto itself at a certain point. And I don't want to do that. I still want to make my own games. I really just want to help other people out in this space. I want to put forth ideas and like design sensibilities and philosophies, and hopefully just kind of push this medium forward. It would be one thing if I was talking about games in general, but I am talking about a very small subsection of, because really visual novels, as much as we like to think about it as like their own like game genre, we're part of the adventure game subgenre,
True.
and we're like, yeah, we're a subsection of a subsection. We're not selling like tens of millions of copies of games.
Yeah.
Even the most successful visual novels are incredibly niche. This is a industry where you have to have like either you have just the staff to spare where you can make a side game for a while, or you are a jack of all trades where you can have a small team put together something within a year or two.
True.
On that note, you mentioned wanting to help out a whole bunch of people with your channel. Are there any particular success stories you have in mind from like developers who actually, went out on a limb to create something? I don't mean to put you on the spot or anything, but rather you mentioned how, most of your viewers have no intention of creating a VN, but that, some people have, and hopefully you've done them a lot of good, right?
I mean, my channel has been around for, I think, technically 1 year now today, because the first video didn't come out until January of last year. So when we're talking about game development cycles, that's a very short amount of time. So I have not had success stories so much as like terrifying, oh no, what have I done to this person?
Oh my
Things.
god.
There was one person, Alexis Royce, who I actually worked with on one of my games, LSD's Love Sucking Demons, where they said that after it was actually after King of the Cul-de-Sac came out, so before my channel, but like when I was still kind of proposing a lot of ideas, they said they had a long meeting with their development team where they had to look at their project in development from scratch. They had to take a really long assessment about what they were doing in the context of what King of the Cul-de-Sac was doing. So just they had to think about how they were going to reapproach their visual novel. They had to think about how they were presenting their game. So that, I mean, it was very nice to hear. It's very nice to hear when you put out a game where it's another team where they're like, oh, we need to, it was so influential in our process. Like we had to rethink stuff. But it's also like just terrifying. And since I've been on Dev Talk and the Discord channel for visual novel devs, I like to hang out in the work streams there. I'm just doing a lot of work. Usually once a week, somebody will be like, wait, are you the Vimi?
Oh baby.
Whoa.
I mean, it's less impressive just because I'm doing videos for visual novel design, and I'm in like one of 3 Discords for visual novel design. So I'm literally hanging out with my target market. But it's just people will have things to say about the projects that they're working on where I helped them out with, and sometimes I think my saving and rollback video also has kind of scared me a little bit, because people keep trying to make Doki Doki Literature Club style games where it's like messing with save files, messing around with rollback features, just stuff where it is, as a designer, that is a very perilous cliff to be walking along. And people are like, thank you for that video. It's really helped me out with my specific game. And it's like, oh no, what are you doing to your players?
You have some very interesting topics. I'm not sure how it's going to play out.
Yeah, so no success stories, I wouldn't say quite yet. Just things where I constantly worry if I've done the right thing or not.
But don't you feel, or at least, what's your stance on when people approach you and tell you how you influence them? Does that feel fulfilling, in a sense?
It's a tough one. I don't know if it's fulfilling. I come from a Catholic house. Good feeling. It's more of like a maybe I won't go to hell now feeling.
I see.
There is a sense of duty in what I'm doing, where I look at games that people are producing, because people ask me to like look at their games. I will not do commentary on my channel on too many other games. I'm thinking about veering out into that for a couple of examples in particular. But for a lot of like English novel devs, where English visual novel devs, where like I know them personally, like that's a weird thing to do to them. But I will play a lot of these games. I will try them out, and there's just a lot of things design wise where I'm like, there is something not quite right with it, or there's just some element where they could really push that forward more. And I worry that it's because they're picking up bad habits from games that they like. And I'm hoping that over time my channel can point out the things that visual novels are doing well and really help emphasize and teach them, but also point out the things that they're not doing so well, and hopefully kind of design people out of it. So, okay, here's going to be a visual novel design secret right here. The ADV style of presenting dialogue in games. You get these like you tap, you get the next little bit of dialogue, and it's just this one little line.
With the text box at the bottom of the screen, right? That's ADV style.
Yep, but like NVL, it's kind of also a similar problem with that, where we have this idea in our head of how much text on the screen is a good amount for a visual novel. And the design that influenced it was from an era of time where computers were 4:3 ratio. They were designed around a resolution of like 400 by 600 pixels. So you couldn't put a lot of text on screen just because to make it a very legible font, the characters would have to be very big. So the idea of like you have to kind of like tap, you get a little bit of text. It's a design limitation because you could only show so many characters on the screen at any given time. And it would take time to load in the next image. It just kind of lent itself well towards having a very small amount of text on screen, which resulted in these things where text-wise, yes, they're a very thick book, but like the thickest book I've ever read, it took me maybe, I want to say 20 hours to read. Like the thickest book, 20 hours. We will have visual novel developers where they are very proud that they have written like 100,000 words. It takes you like 50 hours to read it. Like that's a mark of pride. And it's like, that's just a symptom of how some of these earlier visual novels were produced and why you had to put it on the screen in a certain way. If you did want to have a very long visual novel, you want to present it completely differently because we have widescreen monitors now. Why do you have like your character being, covered by most of the text when you could just put them on the right side and then you can have like a very easy to read kind of style of text on the left side? Like that's a very simple design change that you can make that all of a sudden makes these really long texts work.
There's a VN I read that's similar to that called Companion, where it was mostly NVL style, so where most of the screen was just the white space and then text alongside, and then you can move your mouse over to the left side and it would pull out like the artwork, like a CG.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very clever use of maximizing the screen real estate between the text, which is important, and the visuals, which is also important, balancing that out.
Yeah.
Because because basically you need to think about what your VN is trying to do and how to make it best accommodate your needs and the reader's needs.
I'm going to look that up right now. Companion?
I think it's an indie Chinese visual novel. It was translated like 10 years ago. I want to say it was one of Sekai Project's early works.
Oh, that text is still super. It's not a lot of text on the screen. That's not quite. Oh my god, the line spacing on that.
This VN has problems. It's not one of the greatest I've ever read, and it's not famous probably for a reason, but but I did like it, and I thought it tied similarly into what some of the design choices that you're talking about.
Yeah.
As a callback for our previous episode about Zany UI, because we kind of talked about how to utilize text on screen in different ways with different examples, I would call back Yotsunoha, which has an idea of blending the style of comics with visual novels, in which it puts pop-ups stylized in notes from a notebook with having picture of a character on the left and a small note on the right. And I felt like that's maybe a good way of occupying the, what you said, real estate of screen. And again, another title for you to Google, Vimi. Yatsunoha.
I mean, I'm also thinking of just Homestuck.
Huh?
Oh
Homestuck.
boy, what an example.
Yeah, there you go. Bringing up an example. The guy who developed that, blanking on his name now because I honestly was never into Homestuck. But he put out this visual novel, Cyclonials, last year that did like the same sort of thing where it's images like on the right or on the left, and it's just like a huge text box there. Really good pacing with the text there. But there's tons of different solutions for it. Like for mine, I like to kind of put the text like all over the screen. I like to keep people's eye moving. For LSD, I kept the text onto one side, but I was like doing stuff to it. I think milk inside a bag of milk was another one where that's kind of handled the text pretty well. But the idea is that there's lots of solutions to these problems. Even like a lot of them where they're presenting it in kind of a faux like text message style. And then presenting these games on the phone. Great, that's like another wonderful solution. The problem is that a lot of visual novel devs, because the engines that we're producing stuff in, they kind of had to take into account what people were designing stuff for, or what they were trying to emulate design wise, and they had to build these tools around them. And now all of a sudden, like these formats in the West are kind of locked in with this like 2005 era, like visual novel, collection of games where we're just trying to emulate those looks, while, Japan has, really done a lot to kind of break out of those confines and really do like some really zany stuff with them. And there's a lot of, Chinese, Indonesian, and I want to say French developers too, who've just done really interesting stuff in the narrative space, where eventually I'm going to try to bring some eyes onto those as examples, just so we can have like a new frame of reference for how we can approach visual novels in the West.
Ooh, very nice. Very
nice.
Interesting. And of course, Renpai can accommodate a lot of those different styles, right?
Yep.
And thankfully, we have YouTube channels like yours to explain it.
Yeah.
That's true. There are some very dedicated tutorialists that will guide creators.
I'm still not comfortable with that title, tutorialist.
And
It's just because the word toots in there.
I see.
Gotta toot your own horn.
With that being said, I think we reached ending point for this episode. Thank you very much, Vimi, for appearing as a guest.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And thank you for every listener that joins in. I hope you have a wonderful day, and goodbye.